World War III is trending again, and that sentence alone feels insane. Like, we're actually turning global annihilation into a trending topic. And the scariest part, my generation might be the one sent to fight it, Gen Z. The same kids who grew up building Minecraft houses, not bunkers. Who learned how to shoot on Call of Duty, not in basic training. And now we're supposed to save the world? That's comedy and tragedy rolled into one. I don't know when it started to feel normal, seeing headlines about nuclear warnings, global conflicts, US preparing for war, like it's just another scroll on my feed between cat memes and some guy explaining why oat milk is destroying society. But it does feel normal, too normal, like we're already desensitized. I think that's what scares me most. Not even the bombs or the politics, but how numb we've all become to the idea that the world could just end. And if it does end, guess who's getting the front row tickets? Us. The generation that was raised to chase grades, chase jobs, chase likes, but not to chase survival. I mean, think about it. Our grandparents fought in wars. Our parents worked jobs they hated to keep the lights on. And us, we're the kids who complain if DoorDash takes longer than 30 minutes. We're supposed to suddenly morph into soldiers? That's like throwing a house cat into the wild and expecting it to bring back a deer. I keep seeing TikToks of people joking about dodging the draft, or how they'd rather go to jail than fight in World War III. And yeah, they're funny on the surface. But underneath, there's this uncomfortable truth. Nobody wants this. Nobody feels ready. And that's not cowardice, it's reality. Gen Z isn't built for trenches. We're built for Wi-Fi, memes, and existential dread at 3 in the morning. And I say that as someone who's literally playing Black Ops in the background right now. Like, listen, if you gave me a controller, I might stand a chance. But hand me an actual rifle, drop me in some muddy trench on the other side of the world, and I'm done. Half of us can't even start a fire without Googling it first. You want us to survive chemical warfare? Please. There's this weird duality with Gen Z. On one hand, we're more aware than any generation before us. We know the world is messed up. We talk about climate change, inequality, mental health stuff that used to get swept under the rug. But on the other hand, we're also the most burnt out, overexposed, overstimulated group of people to ever exist. And when you're already running on fumes, the idea of fighting in World War III feels impossible. I was reading about how military recruiters are struggling to get young people to sign up. No surprise there. Who the hell wants to sign their life away for a paycheck that doesn't even cover rent? For a country that feels more divided than ever? For leaders who use us like pawns in games we don't even understand? It's not inspiring, it's depressing. And yet, when push comes to shove, that's who they'll turn to. Us. The kids who grew up doing Fortnite dances and stressing about college debt. There's this moment that stuck with me. I was scrolling late at night, classic insomnia doom scrolling, and I stumbled on a video of some old war footage. Soldiers in trenches, mud up to their knees, explosions in the distance. And I just sat there, staring, thinking, what would my generation even look like in that setting? Would we make TikToks in the trenches? Would people live stream battles for clout? Would someone stop mid-firefight to update their Be Real? It sounds ridiculous, but doesn't it also sound possible? That's how warped everything feels. And that's the part nobody really wants to say out loud. Maybe this isn't just about whether Gen Z can survive a war. Maybe it's about whether we should even be asked to. Like, at what point do we admit that sending a generation already dealing with depression, anxiety, and burnout into World War III isn't just unwise, it's cruel. The irony is, they'll say we're lazy, that we don't want to work, that we're too soft. But maybe softness is just human. Maybe refusing to run headfirst into a meat grinder isn't weakness, but sanity. Maybe the real insanity is pretending war is still a solution in 2025. Sometimes I catch myself imagining it though. The draft letter, the knock on the door, that moment where the hypothetical becomes real. And I picture myself standing there, controller still in my hand, realizing there's no respawn, no save point, just me, my body, my fear. And it doesn't feel heroic, it feels empty, like a bad ending to a story we never wanted to be a part of. And maybe that's why we joke about it so much. The memes, the TikToks, the sarcastic tweets, humor is the only armor we've got left. But deep down, we know the truth. If World War III comes, my generation is not ready. And maybe, just maybe, we shouldn't have to be. When I think about World War III, I don't just think about tanks and bombs. I think about what it would mean for the rhythm of our lives. Like, picture it. One day, you're sitting in your room, headphones on, scrolling through TikTok, laughing at some dumb meme about cats that look like they work in accounting. And the next day, you're told to put that phone down, shave your head, and march into basic training. How do you even process a shift like that? We've been raised in a world where our identities are wrapped up in screens. Take the screens away, and what's left? For our grandparents, war was everything. It was purpose. It was sacrifice. It was survival. But for us, war feels like a glitch in the system. Like, wait, aren't we past that? Didn't we unlock the DLC called Global Peace? But no, same old cycle, just with new graphics. Nuclear graphics. Drone strikes instead of bayonets. AI deciding targets while we're still trying to decide what career we want or if we can even afford to move out of our parents' houses. And there's this expectation, spoken or not, that Gen Z is going to rise to the occasion, that we're going to put our mental health struggles on hold, put the climate crisis on pause, ignore our student debt, and suddenly become warriors. But that's not how it works. You can't just flip a switch and turn a generation of overstimulated, burned out kids into soldiers. And honestly, maybe that's the point. Maybe we're not supposed to. I saw someone say the other day that our entire generation has been softened by comfort, that we don't know how to work with our hands, or push through pain, or fight for anything bigger than ourselves. And maybe there's truth in that. But also, what did you expect? We grew up in a world where every disaster was live streamed, every crisis was debated on Twitter, every failure was memed. We learned to cope with chaos by laughing at it, not by charging into it. Think about it. We survived school shootings, pandemics, housing crises, endless news about the planet burning. But all of it happened behind a screen. We experienced trauma with the option to scroll past it. And that shaped us in ways nobody really understands. Like, how do you expect kids raised on infinite scrolling to survive something as finite as war? And yet, here we are, facing headlines about draft talks and global alliances and nuclear threats. And I can't help but imagine how different this war would look compared to the past. Back then, soldiers wrote letters home, waited weeks for a response. Now, you'd have people FaceTiming from the trenches, posting Instagram stories with captions like, "Just got bombed, ha ha ha." It sounds dystopian, but it also sounds exactly like us. There's a quote I remember. Someone said that World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones, meaning if we screw up this next one, there won't be much left. That sticks with me because it makes me wonder what's left of us even now. Before the bombs, before the draft, before the actual war, what's left of our generation? We already feel like ghosts half the time, disconnected, anxious, floating through jobs and classes that don't mean much. Add war to that, and it feels less like a fight for survival and more like an erasure. And maybe that's what makes all of this so terrifying. Not just the idea of dying in a war, but the idea of dying in a war that doesn't even feel like ours. Because let's be honest, most of us don't believe in the systems we're living under. We don't trust politicians. We don't buy into patriotism the same way older generations did. We look around and see corruption, greed, inequality, and we're supposed to throw ourselves on the line to protect it? For what? For who? Sometimes I wonder if that's why leaders don't trust us. Because they know deep down we're not inspired by their speeches or their flags. We're inspired by each other, by making art, memes, music, stories, by surviving together in spite of the system, not because of it. And if you take that away, if you drag us into a war we don't believe in, what do you think happens? Do we fight harder or do we collapse faster? I don't know. I really don't. And maybe that's the part I keep circling back to, the uncertainty. My generation has lived in a state of maybe for so long. Maybe the planet will collapse. Maybe we'll never pay off our loans. Maybe we'll never own homes. Maybe our mental health will get better. Maybe it won't. Now add, maybe you'll get drafted into World War III to the list, and you've got a generation living in perpetual limbo. And yet, there's still this weird part of me that hopes, if it ever came to that, we'd figure it out. That maybe the same instincts that make us meme about pain would help us survive it. That the same creativity we pour into TikToks and fan edits could somehow be redirected into staying alive. That the same refusal to play by the old rules might save us from repeating the old mistakes. But even as I say that, I can hear the sarcasm in my own voice. Because deep down, I know that war doesn't work like that. War doesn't care about your creativity, or your memes, or your playlists. War just takes. And the idea of it taking my generation, the people I grew up with, the people I scroll past every night, that's the part that makes my chest tight. That's the part that makes all the jokes stop being funny. World War III feels like the ultimate contradiction for Gen Z. We're a generation that talks about self-care and mental health more than any before us. Yet here we are, potentially being asked to sacrifice our bodies and minds in the most brutal way imaginable. It's almost laughable, like, sorry, I can't come to war today. My therapist says I should set boundaries. But behind the sarcasm, there's something real. We were raised to prioritize survival of the self, not survival of the state, and that changes everything. I think about my grandpa sometimes. He fought in Vietnam. The stories he told weren't heroic, they were haunted. He'd sit in his chair, stare off into nothing, and you could tell his mind was back in the jungle. He always said the hardest part wasn't the fighting, it was coming home. Coming back to a world that had no idea what he'd just been through. And I look at my generation, and I wonder, if we went through something like that, would we even make it back? Or would we just be another lost file in the cloud? Because here's the truth. Gen Z is already at war. Not with bullets, but with burnout. Not with bombs, but with loneliness. We're fighting invisible battles every single day against screens, against expectations, against this constant hum of dread that never shuts off. Add a real war to that mix, and it's like piling bricks on a collapsing bridge. How much more weight can it hold before it snaps? And let's not pretend leaders don't know this. They see the stats, rising rates of depression, anxiety, suicide. They know we're fragile. They know we're exhausted. And yet, when the time comes, they'll still point at us and say, your turn. Like we're just pieces on a board game they can reset whenever they want. The thing is, we're not pieces, we're people. And people don't march into death because someone told them to anymore. Maybe that's why Gen Z gets labeled as selfish or lazy. Because we refuse to blindly obey. We question, we resist, we ghost authority the same way we ghost bad dates. And in the context of World War III, that terrifies the people in power. Imagine trying to draft a generation that grew up questioning everything, a generation that doesn't even trust ads on Instagram, let alone government propaganda. You could try to sell us the idea of duty and patriotism, but half of us would just fact check it, call it cap, and post a meme about it 5 minutes later. We're not unreachable, we're just not gullible. And maybe that's exactly what makes this so messy. Because on paper, we should be the perfect soldiers. We're tech savvy, we adapt fast, we grew up playing games that literally trained our reflexes. But emotionally, spiritually, we're already drained. We don't have the reserves of belief that past generations did. We don't look at flags and feel pride. We look at flags and wonder what they're hiding. Sometimes I think about how history will judge us. If World War III actually happens, will textbooks call us heroes or cowards? Will they say, Gen Z refused to fight like it's some grand failure? Or will they say, Gen Z refused to fight like it's the first smart decision anyone made in a century? It depends on who writes the story, and history is always written by survivors. But here's the scary thought, what if there are no survivors? Nuclear weapons don't care what generation you're from. They don't care if you're brave or anxious, patriotic or disillusioned. They erase everything in their path. And in that sense, World War III doesn't feel like a draft. It feels like a death sentence handed down to all of us, regardless of whether we pick up a gun. I keep flashing back to those minute-by-minute videos I've seen. People explaining what happens if a nuclear bomb hits your city. The shockwave, the fire, the radiation. It's horrifying. And yet, I catch myself watching all the way through, as if knowing the play-by-play will somehow prepare me. But it doesn't. If anything, it just makes the anxiety worse, because knowledge without control is its own kind of torture. And maybe that's what this whole situation is. Torture. A slow, psychological unraveling. We're told to live our lives, go to work, pay rent, post content, while the possibility of global war hangs over us like a guillotine. How do you even plan a future in that environment? How do you dream about a career, a family, a home, when tomorrow could be the end of everything? Sometimes I think that's why Gen Z leans so hard into nihilism, into dark humor, into it is what it is. Because when the world feels this fragile, the only defense left is to stop pretending it matters, to laugh at the absurdity of it all, to say, fine, if the world ends, at least I'll go viral on the way out. It's not bravery. It's not even acceptance. It's survival of the psyche. But deep down, I don't think anyone really wants it to end. Not even the most cynical among us. We joke about mushroom clouds, but we still make playlists. We still fall in love. We still daydream about a better tomorrow, even if we don't admit it. That quiet hope is still there, buried under layers of sarcasm and memes. And maybe that's why World War III feels so terrifying, because it threatens to erase even that last flicker of hope. World War III doesn't just scare me because of the bombs or the soldiers or the politics. It scares me because it feels like the final test for a generation that never signed up for the exam. Like imagine handing Gen Z a Scantron sheet that says, Question 1, will you save the world? Circle yes or no. That's the energy of all these headlines, and it's absurd, because we didn't even get a practice round. We were born into chaos. 9/11, climate crisis, school shootings, recession, pandemic. Every milestone of our lives has been marked by disaster. And what's wild is, we've never known a version of the world that felt safe. We were raised in lockdown drills. We were raised in the shadow of financial collapse. We were raised being told the planet was dying. And now, apparently, we're the ones who have to fight World War III. It's like giving someone who barely learned to swim a life jacket and tossing them into a tsunami. I think about the way generations get remembered. The greatest generation fought World War II. The boomers built an economy. Millennials got crushed by it. And us? What's the story they'll write? That Gen Z was drafted into World War III and refused? That we collapsed before it even started? Or maybe, if we're lucky, that we were the first generation to finally say no. And that's the uncomfortable part, because the system depends on us saying yes. Yes to working jobs that don't pay enough. Yes to taking on debt. Yes to living through crisis after crisis. And war is the biggest yes of all. It's the one where you don't just sacrifice your time or your money, you sacrifice everything. And what happens if a whole generation looks around and says, no thanks? Leaders will call it weakness, cowardice. They'll say we're ungrateful, spoiled, selfish. But maybe it's not selfish to want to live. Maybe it's not cowardice to refuse to be cannon fodder. Maybe it's the sanest thing a generation can do. Look at the meat grinder of history and walk the other way. But then there's this haunting thought. What if saying no doesn't matter? What if they take us anyway? What if refusal isn't an option? because the draft isn't a suggestion, it's a command. That's the nightmare scenario. Getting pulled out of your life, ripped away from your routines, your friends, your playlists, and thrown into something you never wanted to be a part of. And that's where the panic hits me, because I know myself. I know my friends. We joke about dodging the draft, about being too weak for the trenches, about tripping over our own boots. But underneath the jokes is fear, real fear, the kind that eats at you quietly at night. The kind that makes you wonder if all your plans, your degree, your relationships, your future are just paper houses waiting to be blown away. It makes me wonder about legacy too. Like, what kind of future do we leave if we're forced into a war we don't believe in? Do we just become another generation erased by history? Another set of names carved on stone walls nobody visits anymore? Or do we leave behind a different story? One about refusing, about choosing life over destruction? I think about the people who already live with war as a constant, not just in history books, but right now. In Ukraine, in Gaza, in places where bombs aren't hypotheticals but daily life. And I realize something. Maybe Gen Z isn't unfit for war. Maybe we're just unwilling to normalize it. Maybe that's our difference. Other generations were told war was honorable, necessary, patriotic. But we see it for what it is: trauma, loss, waste. And maybe being unwilling to accept that is exactly what the world needs. Still, there's that shadow of inevitability. You can refuse all you want, but the gears of power keep grinding. They don't care about your memes or your mental health. They don't care that you're terrified. They just keep turning, dragging everyone closer to the edge. And that's what makes me feel so powerless. It's not that I don't have an opinion. It's that my opinion might not matter. Sometimes I think the scariest part of World War III isn't the war itself. It's the silence before it, the waiting, the uncertainty. Living your daily life like nothing's wrong while knowing everything could change tomorrow. It's like being in a horror movie where you know the monster is coming, but you don't know when it'll kick the door down. And in that limbo, every normal moment feels borrowed. But here's the thing, I don't want to live my life borrowed. I don't want to live waiting for headlines to tell me it's over. I don't want my story to end with a draft letter, and maybe that's selfish. Or maybe it's just human. To want to love, to laugh, to exist without the constant fear of annihilation. So if World War III really is around the corner, I don't know what role I'd play. I'm not a hero. I'm not a soldier. I'm just a guy with a controller in his hand, trying to make sense of a world that keeps getting darker. And maybe that's all I can be, someone who names the fear out loud so it doesn't swallow me whole. World War III. The phrase keeps echoing in my head like a glitch I can't mute. It's everywhere, in headlines and TikToks and late-night conversations where everyone gets quiet at the same time. And the more I think about it, the more unreal it feels. Not because it couldn't happen, but because it shouldn't. Humanity has had every chance to learn, every warning, every scar from the past. And yet here we are, standing at the edge again, staring into the same abyss. And maybe that's what makes this moment feel so heavy. It's not just the possibility of war. It's the possibility that nothing has changed, that all the suffering, all the history, all the lessons written in blood didn't mean a thing. That we're doomed to repeat the same story, just with better cameras and worse consequences. When I picture World War III, I don't see victory parades or medals or speeches about bravery. I see bodies. I see cities reduced to ash. I see families torn apart. And more than anything, I see a generation that deserved better, mine being fed into a fire we didn't start. That thought makes me angry. And sadness always follows close behind. Because here's the truth, Gen Z never asked for this fight. We never believed in it. We never signed our names to it. But the system doesn't ask permission. It just takes. It takes your time, your energy, your health, your future, and war is the purest form of that taking, stripping away every illusion until all that's left is survival or silence. Sometimes I wonder what people in power think when they look at us. Do they see potential soldiers? Do they see expendable bodies? Or do they see what I see when I look around? People trying to make art, to make love, to make meaning out of a world that constantly tries to break them. And if they do see that, how can they still push us towards something as destructive as World War III? The easy answer is they don't see us at all, not really. They see numbers, demographics, manpower, but not the human underneath. Not the kid who grew up staying up late on Xbox Live, laughing with friends he never met in person. Not the girl who learned to play guitar by watching YouTube tutorials. Not the millions of us who turned to screens because the world outside was already too broken. Those people don't exist to leaders. We're statistics, and statistics don't cry when the bombs fall. But we will. That's the part the history books never capture. The tears, the panic, the silence after a scream. And that's what terrifies me most about the idea of my generation in World War III. It's not just the dying, it's the forgetting. The way individuals vanish into numbers. The way lives get reduced to body counts and casualty reports. I don't want to vanish like that. I don't want my friends, my peers, my whole generation to become background noise in some future lecture about the Third World War. We're more than that. We deserve more than that. And if refusing to fight, if saying no, if standing in the way of the machine is the only way to prove it, then maybe that's our role in history, not to win wars, but to stop them from happening at all. But that sounds idealistic, doesn't it? I can already hear the voices saying, "You're naive, you don't understand the world, war is inevitable." And maybe they're right, maybe I am naive. But if being naive means believing that people deserve to live more than they deserve to die for a flag, then I'll take it. If being naive means choosing hope over annihilation, then yeah, I'll own that. Because here's the thing, every generation thinks the world is ending. Every generation feels like they're carrying too much. But what makes Gen Z different is that we've grown up with the end always on the screen. Climate reports, nuclear threats, economic collapses, viral videos of violence. Our apocalypse has been live streamed since we were kids, and yet here we are, still alive, still laughing, still trying. That resilience might not win wars, but maybe it can stop one, or maybe it won't. Maybe we'll still be dragged into it. Maybe the draft letters will come, and the headlines will turn into reality. If that day ever comes, I don't know what I'll do. I don't know what any of us will do. But I know this, we'll go into it together, not as soldiers, not as heroes, but as kids who never stopped wanting a world that was gentler than the one we got. And if this all sounds like a rant, it probably is. But it's a rant I needed to say out loud, because silence feels worse. Silence feels like surrender. And I don't want to surrender. Not to war, not to fear, not to the idea that this is all we're worth. So yeah, World War III might be trending, leaders might be playing with fire, but I refuse to believe that destruction is the only future we have. And if you're still here, listening, maybe you refuse too. Maybe that refusal, quiet, fragile human is the one thing they can't draft out of us. Thanks for watching. Even if you just had this on in the background.